welcome to my podcast. It's great to see you all here today. And I'm so excited because I have Shannon Swales with me today. And she is the burnout psychologist. And I'm going to leave her to introduce herself because I have read her book. I follow her on social media, and she has really helped me so significantly in my journey to recover from burnout as a teacher and a leader. And obviously her background is different, but she has tips that are so valuable for us. So I hope you will hold on, listen through, and gain as much as I did from her. So welcome, Shannon.
Oh, thank you so much, Rowena. And it's an absolute pleasure to be on your podcast. So thank you for inviting me. Introducing myself, I know I'm not alone in this. I find it hard to, who am I? I always like to say I'm a human first, lead with that. But in terms of my work background, I am a registered psychologist in Australia, and I started that journey, keep it short, but 2001, and culminated in a pretty severe burnout in February 2021. And that just set a big course correction in my life to reprioritize things. And that's where my business and the book that you mentioned there, Burnout Psychology Support, came from. Yeah, thank you. Was out of my own recovery. And I now kind of see my burnout as just really, it was the precipice of a course correction in my life. I've suffered from mental illness in and out of my life, depression, anxiety, and probably other burnouts. And that's what I was drawn to psychology in the first place. But yeah, really changing my life around. So I want to help other people do the same and just spread the word, because I know my profession's not the only one to be at risk of burnout, teachers. So I just love sharing my lived experience, but also my, the scientific, the wisdom I've gained from my degree and working with lots of clients. And so, yeah, I'm just happy to be here. But that, I suppose, I'm not just work, but I suppose the other things that I love to travel. Been to the UK, but I haven't really explored it in depth. Would love to go back, visit all parts of the UK. There's so much of the world to see. So I love to travel and love my dogs. I've got 2 dogs and a husband, but love him too, but I love my dogs. They are my pride and joy. I've got 2 who are alive with us, and one that passed away some time ago now, but she lived a full life. So I always say I have 3 doggies, but 2 on earth.
Oh, that's so good. So good to sort of get to know you a little bit. I suppose the thing that comes to me first about what you said in your introduction was that you share your experience of depression and anxiety and burnout. And what teachers say to me is the shame and the guilt that they feel about telling others, admitting it, taking action. How did you manage that? And what would you say to teachers who are experiencing that?
Yeah. I was there. I remember, I couldn't even name depression. That was my first real understanding of a suffering. And I think it was a doctor who wanted to put me on antidepressants. I think I was 20. And I was like, oh, no, not medication. I couldn't even say the word. And I felt a lot of shame because I was like, I am a young woman, I'm intelligent, I've got a loving family. What have I got to be depressed about? So there was a lot of internalized shame. And I'm Generation X on the younger end. I grew up in that world where mental illness wasn't talked about. It wasn't shared. Emotions weren't even shared, let alone mental illness. So I didn't have any mentors or something, or people that came before me that was able to talk about it. So it makes sense to me. And I think for a lot of people, teachers, that if we don't know, it's okay to share, or don't have people who shared before us in our circle, it leads to shame. And some people have shame just when we have reached out. So all I want to say is I get it, and it's really hard. But the stepping stone, I remember starting to study psychology, being around other people interested in psychology. I worked up the courage to just say the word out loud to a group of counselors I was working at. I went through depression. Now, this was like maybe 10 years later. And it was a gradual process of being able to share. And it was very hard for me to share that I was suffering as a psychologist. So there was a whole other level of shame. I couldn't say I was burnt out. I couldn't say I was struggling back prior to February 2021. Took me a lot to share because I was afraid what my profession would think and what people would think, because, hey, I'm a psychologist. I should know better. Why was I burnt out and fatigue, all of that. So I battled the shame again. And again, it was finding, I think my tip here is really you find a safe person. And I was working with this very beautiful supervisor, because it's mandatory for us to have a supervisor. But I had this really beautiful one that I'd been working with for a while, and I worked up the courage to share with her. And it was because she was safe, meaning she was trustworthy. She was always willing to listen, and that we built our relationship, that I just broke down in front of her one day and shared how much I was struggling. So it was, we need to speak our shame, but finding that trusted other and taking that leap. And that it's tricky. Yeah. And I've been met ever since. The more I talk about it, I've met with other safe others who are like, me too, or hey, I've got you back. And it just goes from there. But it's a huge, it's not an easy road, but yeah, finding that person to share, because what breaks shame is talking.
Yeah, that's so helpful to hear. Thank you. I actually was looking on LinkedIn earlier, and one of the very senior people that I follow was saying how he has just experienced burnout and what that has looked like for him a little bit. And the number of really quite big named people who have put on there, thank you so much for being vulnerable. That was me a year ago, or that was me 5 years ago. And I think the fact that we're starting to talk about burnout and the shame of it maybe is lessening a little bit, at least. I think still we feel as teachers like we're letting our colleagues down. I think generally in the world we feel like we're letting people down and being a bit of a drain. But can I ask what it looked like for you, if you don't mind saying?
The burnout?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, what did it look like? The word lost comes up for me, and completely exhausted, soul exhausted. Because for me, it was deep in my soul. I was not aligned. I wasn't living my truth or connected to my truth. So yeah, I was exhausted. I was lost. I was traumatized. What I mean by that is I hadn't processed what I had vicariously witnessed. So I never, of course, with my clientele, I've never experienced trauma from them. It was vicariously through them. But I was holding a lot more than what I realized. And just that constant, and I know I've heard vicariously through teachers, that holding that empathic, compassionate space constantly, we're a human with only so much energy that does deplete over time. So I was just completely out of, like, I would say to my husband going off to work, and I felt so much shame about this in the past, but I say it now, is that I said, I'm going out to pretend to care today. Like, that's not me. Like, I know that was me burnt out. But that's to me a huge sign of compassion fatigue, because it's like I identify as very strongly empathic, but it's an energy thing. And if you don't have the energy, you're not going to be able to be compassionate, not to the level that you usually are. And I would do my best, and I would have the actions of care, but there wasn't the feeling connection that was there before. So they're probably the biggest things that stick with me about what it was like for me. Yeah.
Wow, that's so helpful, because what I'm hearing you saying is that you were acting your job, but actually you couldn't be your full self, because actually the burnout had taken over, if you like, to stop enabling you really to be the fullness of who you are.
Yeah.
And for you, it was the exhaustion and that sort of pretense. See, for me, it was very physical. So some of my hands weren't working properly, and I lost vision in one eye and that sort of thing. So it was a very different look, and everybody's burnout appears so differently, doesn't it?
It does. That's what's so intriguing. The more I work one-on-one with people and in groups and just these chats and interviewing like I did you on my pod, like it's so nuanced. I mean, they say that in in a lot of the literature and the research, but then you witness it and you're like, oh my God, it's different for everybody in how it shows up. And I did have physical symptoms, but they weren't the predominant ones, and whereas I've, heard other experiences where they were the predominant ones. It's very interesting.
So for people listening today who have whatever their symptoms, because we've acknowledged they're very different, what would you be suggesting? Some of the tips, maybe, because you've got this amazing book, Nothing Left to Give, and I can't tell you, everybody, you need to read it. It has really, really helped me on my journey of healing, because it is so dare I say, it's really written in a very human way. So there's no big language. If you're exhausted, you can still read it, because it's broken right down into Shannon's experience and then some top tips. So what would you be suggesting if someone's listening to this and saying, oh gosh, that's how I'm feeling, help, what can I do?
Yeah, look, and if you're really relating to either your Rowena's, like your body is showing up in the burnout, or mine as well, to me that is what I've come to understand, like top level burnout, like there's a research called Nick Petrie who does a lot of work in this area, and he's talked about 3 levels of burnout, or 3 degrees of burnout, and this would be 3rd level. This would be the worst kind of thing, because it really depends on the level as to what is best. And usually when it's to this level, they often recommend rest is important, but it's not enough. So it might look like, and it depends on what is available to you, because I understand a lot of people can't step back from work, but something needs to give, whatever it might be, but it's finding rest somehow, being able to step away, taking some sort of load off, even if it's reducing to part-time or getting a certificate from your doctor to take at least a couple of weeks off, just anything to step back, to get some space, to be able to focus on, and this is my next tip, often when it's this level, we then need to focus on the basics. And what I mean by that is sleep, nutrition, movement, rest, really getting back to that, because often they're all off the charts anyway if we're at this level, and they're hard enough as it is. It makes me think of like the things I focused on, because it was almost like it was a forced choice. I stopped work, but I literally couldn't go. My body had shut down, couldn't do it. So it was a forced leave in a way, but then I focused on I didn't even focus on nutrition, to be honest, because that's a hard area for me. It was just movement. I'd walk my dogs once a day. I would get out in nature. I would rest. And this was very difficult for me to do, because there was my mind telling me, oh, you're bad, you're letting people down. So I took myself off to therapy. So that would be my next thing to say, is connect with a health professional, mental health professional that you can access, who, has training in this area to help you with those big feelings, those big thoughts that are making it hard for you to do the things that matter, that you need to do right now. So I'd be certainly getting myself off to a counselor, or whatever's accessible to you, because I know, again, accessibility, that was something that was accessible to me here in Australia. I got myself off to a therapist and worked on those things. But that would be like 3rd degree, definitely like we're at that precipice, we're lost, we're exhausted, we don't feel like we can go to work the next day. That'd be my tip.
Okay, that's really helpful. I felt for me in your book that there were quite a few tips for people who are probably on that sort of 1 to 2 level. Yeah. So they haven't reached the end of needing the sort of proper significant stop, if you like.
Yeah.
What could you share a couple of things from your book that you think would help those people?
Yeah, I'm trying, there's so many little things in there. But one of the things that I think is demonstrated all throughout my book, and that I was focused on that we can do at any stage of burnout and any stage, even if we're looking at preventing, is like I've just got self-awareness in my head, self-connection, because often part of burnout is we've lost connection with ourselves, or we never had it to begin with, or because it was focused on other people. And a lot of our professions, that's where what we have in common, like education and health, we're focused on our client, the child, the student. So a lot of the tips in my book are focused around how to build that self-awareness, lots of reflection activities. I journaled. I tapped back into my mindfulness because it was something I was already trained in, but that I wasn't utilizing for self-connection, self-awareness. So I was bringing that into, I highly recommend, if you haven't done any work in mindfulness, get on that. Because mindfulness teaches us how to relate to ourselves in a helpful way. We tend to see ourselves through the lens of our judgmental mind, and that's a thinking thing. Whereas mindfulness teaches us to relate to ourselves and the world in a curious, non-judgmental way, and being really present, even with the not so fun stuff, but we need to be present with that. So there's a lot of in my book around some mindfulness tools that I used and then sharing with others. So to help build that self-connection in a very mindful. And probably the other tip is I really worked on compassion for self, because it was something I was trained in doing with my clients, not so good at doing it for myself. So I really honed in on self-compassionate practice. So doing what I was doing for others, but bringing that framework into myself. So there's a lot out there on self-compassion. And in my book, you'll see that influence too. So mindfulness, self-compassion, self-awareness, self-connection. Yeah.
I love that. I mean, I talk about self-awareness being one of the biggest keys in my book,
Yes.
for overcoming burnout. But I think the statistic that I read that has always really shocked me is that apparently about 90% of us think we're self-aware, but in fact, only 15% of us really are. And how, if someone wanted to become more self-aware, is there a tip you could give us?
I'm so glad you asked, because I was like, I missed something very important to say there. We can't be self-aware if we don't give ourselves space to do so. So the tip there is to pencil in time throughout your week. And I know this will be hard, and I'm already hearing in my ear, like, I don't have the time, or I don't have the energy. And I get that, even if it's 5 minutes, that this is time in for self. And there's research, actually, Dan Siegel's research, that indicates one of the core fundamentals for a healthy mind and well-being is to spend time in with self, reflecting, tuning into self. And so this can build, that on that statistic, that we can't be self-aware if we don't spend time with ourselves in that way. And it needs to be in a mindful, compassionate way, because when we have time in with self, which I did back then. I didn't have a pencil in my diary, but I was reflecting myself. I was doing it through the lens of judgment, and I was doing it. And so I wasn't mindful, and I was certainly not doing compassion. So that's where those components are important. But yeah, we need to create space in our diaries for that, because our brains can't do that while we're on the run, while we're busy, tending to everyone. So we do need to be very purposeful on carving out that time. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, start somewhere in the week, not daily. Like I always tell my clients, start where you feel you can. Like 5 minutes a week, great. It's better than 0.
Yeah, I love that. You've got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Again, be kind to yourself in where you're starting. Start small, because little steps regularly make the big difference, don't they?
Exactly. You can build, everyone, like even Olympics was just on, they started somewhere, in their practice. They weren't swimming the 50 in, however many seconds they do now. They started somewhere.
Okay. And the last question I've got for you is, your book is very much based on the fact that you journaled.
Yes.
through it. And what is the benefit of that for you? You mentioned it a little bit earlier, but why would you encourage other people to journal? How does it help?
It makes you face things. Like I knew that I wasn't facing things, and I went, okay, what can I do that will help me do that? And I was like, journaling. And obviously as a psych, I knew about the technique. I didn't often recommend it, which is very telling prior to actually doing it myself. But yeah, that it's because it helps you confront what is showing up for you. And I made a promise to myself, okay, well, I promised to my clients that I left, and a promise to all the people I felt so bad that I let down. I'm like, well, I can't change the past, but I can work on me now and change that for the future if I go back to working with people, or just to the people in my life, because I certainly was letting them down in ways as well. So I was like, you need to confront this. You need to work on you. So let's journal. And which was a really compassionate thing in the end for me too, even though it was for others as well. It just really helps you face what is. And then from there, be able to, it's like someone said to me, follow the breadcrumbs. It's like these breadcrumbs come out of it, like, because you're listening to your feelings because you're writing them down. You're listening to your mind because you're writing them down. You're listening to your body. So I always would, what am I feeling? What am I thinking? What am I sensing? Those are, and bring that mindful compassion into each journal entry. So that's why those tools are very important. So don't just journal on your own, because it can end up being counterproductive. It can end up making us feel worse because we just get lost in our thoughts and in our pain. So mindfulness and compassion are your friends along the journey of journal. But journal really helps you connect to you, really confront. No hiding. That's what I felt. No hiding anymore. Damn it. I mean, I could have, but I was like, I owe it to me, but I owe it to others as well. And that's just the person I want to be from here. Like, yeah.
I love that. I've actually got a journal for teachers coming out.
I know. Excited.
So I'm quite excited about that too, because I'm passionate about journaling and the benefits for me. And when I look back, a year ago or 6 months ago, even a month ago, I see where I've come and the growth. So it's actually very encouraging. Even if I feel, I'm having a bad day, I can still see that I'm coming.
That's the other, that's a beautiful benefit that, when I go back and read the book, which I do sometimes, because it is, my journal, I'm like, oh my God, look how far I've come. Yeah. It's really helpful for that purposes too. And I remember reading it one day, reading an entry, just a random one. And what I had written, I needed to hear again. So it was really powerful in that way too. It was a passage I'd written about my dad, and a letter I had found that he wrote actually back when in my first depressive episode. But I didn't have the language for it back then. And I needed to hear that again because I was in a bit of not like a depression, but just a bad day, not to where I was before. And it was just really helpful. So yes, journaling has a lot of benefits. Yeah.
Brilliant. Right. Well, thank you so much for your time. We're so grateful because there's so many nuggets in there that we can learn from. Shannon, if people want to connect with you, what's the best way?
Probably two ways. The website, www.burnoutspsychologysupport.com, and my social media, which is Burnout Psychology Support as well. Instagram, Facebook, not Twitter, TikTok, actually, I'm just trying out, but I'm not so great at that one. And Threads, actually, I'm trying out at the moment, but it's all Burnout Psychology Support. So easy peasy to find me.
And I just want to give another plug for Shannon's book, Nothing Left to Give, A Psychologist's Path Back from Burnout, because I think for us, it feels like we as teachers are burning out. But if even a psychologist can burn out, then it makes it, dare I say it, Shannon, it makes it even more okay that we can burn out too, because we're all empaths, we're all compassionate to those around us, and we're giving out all day. But actually we're all human at the end of the day, and that's where you started, isn't it? You are human.
Yes.
And we need to remember that and be a bit kind to ourselves. So I'm so grateful to you for sharing everything and all your wisdom today. And I hope people have enjoyed this.
Thank you. And me too. I hope so as well. But thank you so much for having me on and sharing, having the opportunity to share as well. I just want to get it out there and help other people feel like they can make their next step on the road to their recovery and growth. And yeah.
Oh, bless you. Thanks, Shannon. Thanks for listening. I hope you took something of value from today. If you want to connect, I'm at rowenahicks.com, or I have a Facebook group, which is Preventing Teacher Burnout. So I look forward to connecting to you at one of those.